Let's play a game. I want you to think of what you believe the most successful product ever made is. And I don't mean the best-selling product, I mean something a little trickier. The product that changed the lives of the most people. Now your first instinct might be something like the smartphone. Maybe it's the automobile. Or the light bulb. Maybe the personal computer. But there's something in common with all of those. People actually wanted them. I'm looking for something stranger. A product that helped create the modern world despite the fact that almost nobody watching this video has ever wanted to own one. And there's a very good chance that half the things in the room that you're sitting in right now, whether it's your television or your furniture, possibly even the device you're watching this on, have spent part of their lives inside one. I am talking about this. Which is profoundly disappointing. I know it's a metal box, but stay with me. Because the interesting thing about this box is not what it does, it's what the world had to become once we all agreed to use the same one. Before the container, moving goods around the world was an extraordinarily messy business. Imagine you're shipping 10,000 different things across an ocean. Barrels, crates, coffee beans, machinery, furniture. Someone has to move those things onto a truck, then off the truck, then into a warehouse, then out of the warehouse, then onto a ship. And then that ship travels thousands of kilometers, and then once it reaches its destination, you do the same thing again. You're talking about different weights, different packaging, different handling requirements, and every time a human being touches the cargo, a number of things could go wrong. You're talking about delays, damage, theft, misplacement, a number of added costs. So here's a question. If you were trying to make shipping dramatically cheaper, what would you improve? The ship? The crane? The port? Well, Malcolm McLean eventually realized that the answer was none of them. You see, the problem wasn't how slowly the ship moved. The problem was that the cargo kept having to be touched. So instead of making every individual object easier to move, make the objects disappear. Put them inside one box, seal the box, and from that point forward, nobody needs to give a shit what's inside. Now that distinction sounds almost trivial, but it wasn't. It was one of the most consequential abstractions of the 20th century. In 1956, a converted oil tanker called the Ideal X left New Jersey for Houston. And on its deck were 58 containers. And here's what I love about moments like this. Almost nobody watching that ship leave the port could have possibly understood what they were actually witnessing. Because the breakthrough wasn't really the box. Of course, boxes had existed. The breakthrough was the system. A container could leave a factory on a truck, be lifted onto a ship, cross an ocean, be lifted onto a train, then onto another truck without anyone ever opening it. Think about what just happened there. A truck speaks one logistical language, a ship speaks another, a railroad or a railway speaks another. The standardized container became something like a universal translator between them. And once containers themselves became increasingly standardized internationally, the world's transportation infrastructure could begin designing itself around the box. And that's where this gets enormous, because we usually think that products adapt to the world. But this product made the world adapt to it. Ports, ships, cranes, warehouses, rail terminals, trucks, all changed. Old ports that relied on armies of workers manually handling cargo suddenly faced a brutal reality. A crane could move an entire container in one operation. That meant entire gains in productivity, but also disruption. Longshoremen who'd built livelihoods around physically loading and unloading ships saw parts of their occupation disappear. And some older urban ports simply weren't well suited to this new system. Container terminals wanted enormous amounts of land, huge cranes, rail access, highway access, storage yards. So economic activity began moving. The box didn't merely change transportation. It helped redraw cities. And we're still only halfway down the rabbit hole, because once transportation becomes dramatically cheaper and more reliable, something else happens. Distance becomes less expensive. And that changes what a factory is. Imagine you manufacture something in 1950. If transporting components is expensive, there's a strong incentive to keep suppliers relatively close by. But now imagine transportation costs fall. Suddenly, Why does this component need to be made here? Why not somewhere where labor is much cheaper? Why not manufacture one component in one country and another somewhere else? Assemble the product somewhere else entirely and then ship the finished product across an ocean. You begin to get something we now consider completely normal: the global supply chain. A product can effectively be a citizen of 6 countries before it reaches your house. And researchers who study containerization have found something remarkable. Its effect on international trade appears to have been enormous, larger than many of the trade agreements that governments spend decades negotiating, which produces a slightly ridiculous conclusion. Politicians spend the 20th century signing treaties to encourage globalization, while a steel box might have done more practical work than any of them. And now look around your room again. Look at your TV. Containerization helped make the economics of your TV possible. The same with furniture or clothing or electronics. The container didn't invent any of them, it changed which ones could economically reach you. And that's why calling it a box misses the point. The container is really a piece of infrastructure designed as a product. Its greatest innovation is not containing things, it's making contents irrelevant to the transportation system. The crane doesn't care whether it's lifting TVs or shoes, neither does a ship or a truck or a port. To the system, everything becomes the same object. 20 feet, 40 feet, lift, stack, move, and then repeat. And I feel like there's something almost philosophically beautiful about that. The container succeeded by removing information. The global economy became more complicated because transportation became simpler. But there is one final reason that I think this might be one of the, if not the most successful products ever created. You can desire an iPhone or admire a Lamborghini. You can dream about owning a Rolex Day-Date. But nobody goes into a store and thinks, you know what would really improve my life? An 8-foot wide steel freight container. The end consumer doesn't even need to know it exists, and yet it quietly sits behind an absurd amount of modern consumption. It doesn't need advertising or celebrity endorsements. It doesn't even need a beautiful design. I mean, it looks like shit. Most of them are scratched and rusting and stamped with ID numbers. And perhaps that's precisely why we overlook them. Because we're naturally attracted to inventions that change what we do. Like the smartphone changed how we communicate. The car changed how we travel. But there is another category of invention that is a lot harder to notice, and those are inventions that change what is economically possible. And those may be even more powerful. So the next time you see one of these ugly ass metal boxes sitting on the back of a truck on the highway, consider that you're looking at one of the fundamental building blocks of globalization. A box so successful that ports, ships, factories, highways, railways, cities, and international trade reorganize themselves around it, so that you could spend your entire life benefiting from it without ever wanting one. Well, until next time.